If you know me, you'll know that I am a massive appreciator of art. As you can see, I visit the Louvre at least twice a week, and as a Catholic, I am passionate about Baroque Counter-Reformation art. But beyond my love for the richness and deep theology is a whole different world that plays a whole different game. One that's slightly less about brushstrokes and divine inspiration, and more about million-dollar hammer prices and strategic portfolio allocation. Picture this: you're at a private equity partner's home in the Hamptons. On the wall hangs what looks like paint splattered on canvas. Thing is, it's worth more than most people's houses. Someone casually mentions that they just flipped a Basquiat for 8 figures. Another casually discusses their Warhol's performance versus their tech stocks. Suddenly you realize that you're not watching art appreciation. What you're seeing is alternative asset management disguised as cultural sophistication. When understanding auction dynamics matters more than color theory, and knowing market makers trumps art history knowledge. As you know, classical art is a passion of mine, but today we're not diving into the world of art history. We're decoding the art market, a multi-million-dollar ecosystem where culture meets capitalism. And understanding this language allows you to stand confidently in rooms where serious money moves.
Before we dive in, let's address the elephant in the room. Many people know me as a classical art guy. But today you won't hear me discussing Leonardo, Michelangelo or Caravaggio, not because they're unimportant, but because they're relevant in today's art market conversations. Here's the reality: true old master paintings almost never come to market. They're locked up in museums, they're in churches or generational family collections. When a genuine Renaissance or Baroque masterpiece does appear at an auction, maybe once every few years, this makes international headlines precisely because it's so extraordinary. The wealthy people you'll encounter aren't buying Rembrandts, they're buying Pollocks and Picassos. The art market that drives conversations, prices and investment strategies operates from the 19th century forward. Everything before that tends to be museum pieces or cultural heritage, rather than active investment opportunities. Contemporary and modern art represents over 80% of auction house revenue. This is where fortunes are made and lost, where market trends matter, and where the social and financial dynamics actually play out. So today we're focusing on the art world that wealthy people actually participate in, not the one they visit on museum weekends. Let's get practical about when and why this knowledge actually matters in your life. Because it's not about becoming an art critic. It's about understanding an industry that for us mere mortals who had to add water to our shampoo just seems so elusive that someone could sell that same empty shampoo bottle for more than our net worth. So here are some contexts where understanding this world could come in handy. Business context. You're in a client's office and there's clearly expensive art on the walls. Maybe it's a large abstract piece, some photography or something that looks important. You need to acknowledge it intelligently without pretending to be an expert. This isn't so much about art appreciation as it is about reading the room and engaging appropriately with someone's display of wealth. Networking events, gallery openings, museum galas, art fair VIP previews. These aren't really about the art, they're networking opportunities disguised as cultural events. The art provides the backdrop, but the real action is relationship building. Understanding this dynamic helps you to navigate these spaces effectively. Social situations. You're at dinner and your host starts discussing their collection, recent auction results, art market trends. This isn't cultural conversation, this is more of wealth management. They're talking about assets, performance, and strategy using art as the vehicle. And then we have investment discussions. Art increasingly appears in conversations about alternative investments, portfolio diversification, and wealth preservation. Private equity types, family office managers, and high net worth individuals discuss art the same way they discuss real estate or commodities, as an asset class with specific characteristics and performance metrics. Let's understand why wealthy people actually participate in the art market. Because despite what we might think, or rather what they want us to think, it's really about loving beautiful things. First, there's portfolio diversification. Art provides exposure to an asset class that operates independently of traditional financial markets. When stocks crash, art markets might continue performing. When currencies fluctuate, physical art holdings maintain their intrinsic value. For ultra-high net worth individuals, this diversification is crucial for risk management. Tax strategy. This is where art becomes really interesting financially. Museum donations provide tax deductions based on appraised values, often significantly higher than the purchase prices. Storing art in free ports avoids sales taxes. Estate planning through art can minimize inheritance taxes. So for the wealthy, buying art isn't just about culture, it's about optimizing their tax situation. Art also provides discrete wealth storage. Unlike real estate or business ownership, art can be owned completely privately through shell companies and stored in climate-controlled facilities. It's wealth that doesn't appear on any public records, can be moved internationally, and remain completely anonymous. For people managing significant wealth, this privacy is invaluable. When it comes to market performance and liquidity, the performance metrics are in the artists. Blue-chip artists like Picasso, Warhol, and Basquiat have consistently outperformed many traditional investments over decades. Unlike stocks, you can display your investment and enjoy it while it appreciates. The downside is illiquidity. You can't sell art as quickly as securities, but for long-term wealth preservation, this works extremely well. Understanding who controls the art market helps you to decode how it actually operates. This isn't so much about cultural institutions, it's about commercial enterprises managing billions in transactions. Sotheby's and Christie's, these two auction houses handle roughly 80% of high-end art auctions globally, moving billions annually. These aren't just auction houses, they're financial institutions that provide loans, authentication, insurance, and advisory services. They shape market values through their marketing, client relations, and sales strategies. If someone mentions consigning to Sotheby's, they're discussing serious financial planning. Then we have the galleries. When it comes to gallery representation, there's Gagosian, David Zwirner, Hauser & Wirth. These are the names that control which artists achieve market success. Gallery representation is like having Goldman Sachs underwrite your IPO. It signals market confidence and provides access to major collectors. Understanding gallery hierarchies helps you to recognize which artists have institutional backing versus independent success. And then we have art fairs. Art Basel Miami Beach, Frieze London, FIAC Paris. These events are where the global art market convenes. They're not cultural conventions, they're commercial marketplaces where millions in transactions happen during week-long events. Understanding the fair circuit helps you to understand the art world's commercial calendar. So who are the market makers and influencers in this industry? It all comes down to the power players. Certain collectors, advisors, and critics can make or break artistic careers through their endorsements and acquisitions. Names like Larry Gagosian, David Zwirner, or collectors like Francois Pinault don't just participate in the market, they create it. Recognizing these influence networks helps you understand how market values are established. So what actually drives these crazy prices? When you see headlines about $450 million paintings, there's actually some logic behind the numbers that seem completely insane to normal people. It all comes down to a few factors. 1. Scarcity and market manipulation. Artificial scarcity. Unlike stocks where millions of shares exist, there might only be 20 museum-quality Basquiats available for purchase globally. Galleries and estates can control supply to maintain pricing, some even destroying art to maintain this artificial scarcity. When demand from global billionaires exceeds the available supply, prices explode exponentially. It's basic economics with extreme numbers. Another factor is the attribution wars that go on behind the scenes. For example, a painting attributed to Leonardo da Vinci, for example, sells for $450 million. However, if that same painting was attributed to a Leonardo follower, that might sell for a mere $500K instead. Because so much money is involved, authentication is extremely important, and this involves art historians, scientific analysis, and often fierce academic debates that determine market values. Understanding this helps explain the seemingly arbitrary price differences. And then we have market momentum and speculation. Like any investment market, Art experiences bubbles driven by speculation rather than intrinsic value. When certain artists become fashionable among wealthy collectors, prices can increase 1,000% in a few years. Recent examples include Jean-Michel Basquiat, whose prices increased dramatically after his work became trendy among tech billionaires and celebrities. And lastly, we've got ownership history. Provenance, referring to who previously owned the work, can dramatically impact value. A painting once owned by David Bowie, or displayed in a major museum, or connected to historical events, commands premium pricing. Sometimes the ownership story is more valuable than the artwork itself. So here's what you actually need to navigate art world conversations without pretending expertise you don't have. If you see expensive art in someone's office or home, you can say something like, "I love how this piece anchors the room. What drew you to this artist?" This works for literally any art. It shows you paying attention and gets them talking about their decision-making process rather than testing your knowledge. When art market or investment topics come up, you can ask an intelligent question like, the art market seems to operate by completely different rules than other investments. How do you approach this with due diligence? This shows you understand that it's not just about beauty, while inviting them to share their expertise. If someone mentions collecting, you can ask a question like, "How did you first get interested in collecting?" I imagine developing an eye takes considerable time. This gets them talking about their journey rather than expecting you to demonstrate knowledge. And most collectors love sharing their origin stories. It's important to not accuse them straight off the bat of doing this for financial reasons. Perhaps they actually like the art. Not. If someone casually brings up auction results or market trends, you could make a comment such as, "These auction results are fascinating to follow. Do you see it as part of broader alternative investment trends?" This will connect art to wider financial conversations that you're more likely to understand. Instead of memorizing art history, here's what you'll actually likely see in these spaces and what you might need to recognize. First up, we have contemporary blue chip artists. Andy Warhol, soup cans, celebrity portraits, bright colors. If you see familiar pop imagery in expensive frames, it's probably Warhol or Warhol inspired. Basquiat, crown symbols, text, primitive style figures on bright backgrounds. Hockney, Paul paintings, California landscapes, bright blues and pinks. And then we have abstract and modern recognizable styles. Pollock style, paint splatters and drips on large canvases. Rothko style, large color-field paintings, often rectangles of color. And of course, Picasso, fragmented faces, geometric shapes, distinctive style even in sketches. And then there's photography and contemporary media. High-end photography often includes Ansel Adams landscapes, Annie Leibovitz's portraits, or Richard Avedon fashion photography. And then we have contemporary sculpture, Jeff Koons balloon animals, Damien Hirst spots or preserved animals, and large-scale installations, etc. Let's be honest about what these art events actually are. Networking opportunities with cultural cover. Here's how you work a gallery opening. Spend about 15 to 20 minutes maximum looking at the art, because that's not what it's really about. Then, focus on meeting people. Use the art as conversation starters. Interesting opening. How do you know the artist, or how do you know the gallery? Then, pivot to business or personal connections. The art merely provides context, but relationships are the true purpose here. Museum events. These are high-level networking disguised as cultural philanthropy. Tickets cost thousands because you're paying for access to other attendees, not the cultural experience. So if you ever get invited to one of these, understand the social dynamics. People support museums to signal cultural sophistication and meet other wealthy individuals. And then we have art fair previews. VIP access to art fairs before public opening provides networking opportunities with collectors, dealers, and cultural influencers. These events combine serious commerce with social positioning, million-dollar transactions happening alongside champagne receptions. Now here are some warning signs and taboos. Now, having lived in Cape Town for about 2 years, where modern art is basically the only art that exists there, hence a very thriving modern art space, I can assure you that there are a lot of weirdos in this space. Recognizing when someone is trying to test your knowledge versus genuinely engaging helps you to navigate these conversations safely. Here's how you tell if someone is just trying to test you. Red flags include asking if you recognize specific artists, unless it's a Picasso or a Pollock, obviously you don't. Dropping obscure names, discussing recent auction results in technical detail, using lots of insider terminology. Your response to this should simply be, I'm still developing my understanding of the market, but I'm genuinely curious about whatever they're passionate about. Honesty will beat pretense every time. When you do meet someone serious and worth speaking to, here are some things you should never say. 1. As always, never ask about price or value directly. 2. Never dismiss work as not art or my kid could do that, even if it is true. Number 3. Never pretend to recognize artists you don't know. And number 4. Never make investment predictions about art that you don't understand. These responses immediately mark you as someone who just doesn't understand the cultural context. If you find yourself out of your depth, which you probably will, just recover with graceful honesty. Say something like, this market seems incredibly complex. How do you stay current with all the changes? Or just a genuine remark like, I'm fascinated by how authentication works in practice. These redirect conversation to their expertise while showing genuine interest in learning. Now, if you want to learn more, and since this is more about business and investment, not art history, here are some practical resources for staying informed. Number 1, of course, following Sotheby's and Christie's, that's a good starting point. ArtNet News for market trends and auction results. The Art Newspaper for industry news and market analysis. Artsy app for quick artist lookups and price databases. All of these provide more business intelligence rather than the cultural education. In terms of people you can follow, Jerry Salt's on Instagram for accessible market commentary, ArtNet's auction database for historical price information, and gallery websites, of course, for current market positioning of artists. If this specific aspect of high society is what you're going for, focus on understanding market dynamics rather than artistic movements, while other aspects of, actual art history does play a big role in high society in terms of education and culture. In this space, it matters just a bit less. Now remember, your goal is navigating art market conversations confidently, not becoming a curator. Learn to spot when art matters in the room and have 2 to 3 go-to questions that work in any situation. Understand it's often about money and status, and know when to engage versus when to just admire quietly.